Welcome to Massive Beers. My name is Matt. We do the beer stuffs here, and we do a lot of different things. It's all beer pretty much, but there's a lot of different angles we come at. There's a lot of like just straight up beer reviews of beers I buy and we review them, yada yada. A lot of people send us beers, and we do a bunch of series and aged beers and all kinds of things. Tonight's beer review is going to be a two-part series. The word "part" means kind of a lot in this, because there's a couple different moving parts here. First things first. We're reviewing these beers. I've reviewed one of these technically before. That would be number 3? Yeah, number 3. And this is number 4. This is Rushing Duck's Part Series. This is a barrel-aged blend series that honestly, whenever I talk about barrel-aged programs in the United States, I typically always mention Rushing Duck as one of the sneakier ones in here. This is the reason why. The impetus for this is courtesy of my buddy Benjamin, who was the first person to ever kind of clue me in on Rushing Duck and what they do. Part of that was him actually sending a part series to me. I believe the first beer he sent me was Dog's Bollocks, which is a barley wine. It's in one of these beers. We'll get to that in a minute. And kind of turned me on to them. They weren't super far from where I lived in northeastern Pennsylvania. Oddly enough, they're the same distance now here in New Jersey. And just became one of my favorite kind of breweries going. Fast forward up until September, a couple months ago. It's actually Christmas Eve tonight, so I'll put this up tonight for y'all. So Merry Christmas Eve for y'all. On my way to Beer Palooza, I was like, hey, dude, I'm going to come up a day early and I want to hang. Because we haven't seen each other in quite some time, pandemic times, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, I have some beer for you. Well, he unloaded a epic, crazy bomb of beer on me. Lo and behold, there was a bunch of beers. There was a bunch of these in there. Actually, there was multiples of these in there. I gave some to Steven. I drank some myself. But I made sure I kept 2 parts of the part series. You get the part now, don't you? So this is, 3 and 4. I also have 5 and 6. I will review those tomorrow and upload them. So we're going to do a back-to-back, side-by-side, barley wine, blended, barrel-aged stout, thingamabobber kind of blend thing going on. So that's what we're going to do. Gonna crack this sucker. They're part of the same series, but they're different blends. The cool part, and the reason why I'm doing it in a 2-part series, is one, I don't want to open 4 huge, bombastic, high ABV beers in one night, and they're actually both, these two and the other set I'm going to do, are both released in the same year. So let's talk about that. What do we have going on here? We have the part series. It's the barrel-aged blend, part 3 here. Russian Duck Brew Company, Orange County, New York. That's all they really give you on the bottle. Over here, much the same barrel-aged blend, part 4. They actually just made the same label and actually put it in permanent marker, which kind of makes me like it that much more. So exactly the same labels, but I do have the website up here. They've made 5 of these. There's a part 2. There was no part 1. There's a part 2, which I believe I had, but I've never reviewed. Part 3, this one I reviewed before if you want to go back and check that out. This is 11.7%. This is a blend of their Dead Morose, which is a Russian Imperial Stout. That's aged in bourbon barrels. Their Gluten Wine, aged in bourbon barrels. And their Quad, aged in rye barrels. Dark, deep, and mysterious, but not too sweet, with a note of dark fruit. Released June 2016. Let me turn my fridge off. I don't even know how much you hear that buzzing, but it annoys me. And then we have over here, we have part 4, which is a 12.1, so a little bit higher in ABV. A blend of experimental English barley wine aged in bourbon barrels. Imperial Nimtopsicle Ale aged in bourbon barrels. In Quad aged in rye barrels. So we have that common denominator there with that Quad aged in rye. Almost sweet. I'm sure they're very sweet. With big malty bourbon concoction is dried out from the high ABV barley wine in the Quad, released July 2016. So we have a June and July blend going on. I find that interesting, that they do these big things a month apart. I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna dive in on see what we got going on. Russian Duck. I just not a big hiss over here. Bigger hiss over here. Just one of my favorite breweries to go to with the pandemic and the kiddo and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of hard to get out and about nowadays, so it's not like I get there all that often. But when I do get to Orange County, New York, we go. So let's do the old double pour. I will tell you right now, the one over here, the older one, the part 3, much darker. Like, much darker in the pour. Okay. You don't have to fill your whole glass. Rookie mistakes. I have this bottle stopper for this sucker over here. And I don't know if my little, oh, thank you, Russian Duck. A lot of times these 750s won't fit this kind of recapper over here, but they accommodated. So now we're going to talk about the labels. Labels are cool. I dig them. It's kind of a Friday the 13th thing, but they're the same for each year's. I don't know if you... No, you could definitely see that on screen. Look at how much darker this one is. Lighter ABV. Sure, we're talking about... actually, we have the Dead Morose has to be why. This one's coming up much, much darker because, like I said, the Russian Imperial Stout is not in this one over here. Over here, we have barley wine at their Imperial Nimpomsicle ale aged. I don't know if it's stout, but you can just see by the look of it, this one much, much darker than the one over here. The dark one, little mahogany tones on a kind of a doo-doo water brown look. This is almost like just like classic English barley wine style kind of doo-doo brown, straight up. Over here, a touch, I would say a touch more carbonation, a touch more head. But they're looking very much a very fun duo. Let's get a nose. Part 3. Oh, man. It just has that richness that only... Rewind. It has that richness and that maturity, kind of airing into kind of port wine, which is me trying to say raisin nuts and sugar daddies, which is what I typically say, that you can really only get with a high ABV big beer. I say that just because, we have a blend going on here, very much kind of barley wine vibes we have going on, but it has this nice molasses, blackstrap molasses. I made a sugar daddy out of blackstrap molasses and just sprinkled a little bit of raisinette on it. That's kind of what you have going on here. So it's not that full fleshed out 10, 15-year-old hardy old stock kind of thing going on here, but very, very close to that. Just a big mature rich nose, and again leaning in very kind of port heavy vibes here in a very beautiful way. Oh man, it's like it smells delicious. Let's put it that way. Exactly kind of what I wanted. We had a beautiful full day of Christmas. This is my first Christmas really with my son last year. He's not even not even a year old yet. Doesn't really kind of moving or anything, but now he's kind of running around. He's laughing. He's giggling. He's having fun. He opened a present. Those kind of things going on. Had a wonderful day with family. Kind of wanted to cap it with something special. I think I made the right decision. I didn't even think about doing this until after. I was like, I'll drink. I was like, I'll get those beers. Let's get part 4. Yeah, much more of a spicy barley wine. Maybe that quad and that rye is coming through a little bit more, but there's this spiciness, this almost like hops, Ghost of Hops Past American barley wine kind of tannic tea-like kind of spiciness going on over here. Definitely doesn't have that sugar daddy vibe that we have going on over here. But there is this kind of rich, old school kind of barley wine. Very much barley wine over here. Very much kind of like the 3 parts they're talking about here, which is your Russian Imperial Stout, your barley wine, and your quad. It has that kind of blend, reminiscent very much of kind of like a Cane's Anniversary Series. This over here is very kind of like blend English American barley wine kind of thing going on with a hefty dollop of confectionery, like combination of like coconut vanilla I'm getting over here, but it has a distinct difference. I mean, you can see it visually, but I didn't think it'd be that much of a difference than the beers over here. Yeah, sharper, cleaner. I shouldn't use the word clean because it's not technically clean, but squeakier. The difference between a barley wine and a stout is kind of, that's the very apparent difference. While you can get a lot of similar notes, especially when it comes to bourbon barrel aged, especially comes to aged, you're talking about 8 years now on these beers, going on to 9 next year, so 8.5 years technically. it just has this kind of sharpness to it that barley wines tend to bring without that epic long-term aging. Now, when you have the blend kind of going on over here, I think it kind of tampers that a little bit. The richness of the stout kind of makes it a little bit wider, makes it a little bit richer, but a fun duo. Not gonna lie to you, winner over here on the nose at least. So, yeah, actually, I'm gonna go opposite. I think this one's gonna be a little bit more richer, and just something about it. I kind of want to start over here. So I know I started over here with the nose, but we're gonna start over here in the actual taste. So we're gonna go start with 4. Cheers. That's delicious. I mean, it does bring those kind of sugar daddery vibes. Sugar daddery? I said something different there. Dad-esque. Let's go that way. Kind of vibes to it, but in that kind of spicier fashion. Again, it has to be a combination of a ghost of hops past. That maybe that Nim Popsicle ale. I'm gonna have to look that up to see if that's an American barley wine, because it says they're English barley wine, Imperial Nim Popsicle, Asian burn barrels. It has to be something kind of spicy in combination with that rye from that barrel aged quad. Nice mouthfeel, especially for its age. A little bit carbonation lost here. I'm not going to cry about it. Super aged blend. Again, that's what you're kind of expecting. Not flat by any means, but you would love a touch more carbonation. A nice sweet, again, spicy caramel is kind of where I'm leaning on this one. With this nice, readily apparent kind of booziness, but since it has had that time on it and it is barrel aged, it tempers it really well. There's no hotness here. You just know you're drinking something of higher ABV. And really does come off as like a really fun, really well done barley wine blend. I would say that's how it comes off to me, as a strictly barley wine blend. Well, it has that quad in there. It just leans that way for me. Where I think the other one over here, part 3, is going to be a little bit different, but this is absolutely delicious. Almost like if I'm going to say the best kind of comparison I would give you is if you took a 10-year-old JWEs and blended it with a 10-year-old Bigfoot. That's kind of where this lands for me. So you get that little bit of weird English yeastiness and booziness and toffiness that you get from that JWEs, but add that kind of spiciness and tannic, tea-like bittering, hoppy quality that you get from the Bigfoot. That's where this one kind of sits for me. So, yeah, let's dive on part 3. Cheers, y'all. Okay. See, now this is where I was curious about. It does lack a little bit of that impact that I was expecting it to have. Hence the reason why I moved over here. Doing these side by side, it's not science, obviously. These are big, bold beers, rich beers, aged beers that typically have multiple levels to them. Whichever one you're going to start with first is usually going to have a bit more of an impact. There's really not much way around that. Sure, we could drink some water. Actually, I have some water. I usually don't back here. I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see right there. There? I'm cleaning all my vinyl. So I bought one of those kind of wet wash vinyl cleaners. And gotta use distilled water. So. But it just has this less of an impact I thought it would. I started over here because I thought it was going to be the opposite. I thought this was going to be a little bit less to this one. That way this one would shine through. Hence the water. And cleanse the palate just a little bit. But it's always going to be a little bit more impactful over here. Now we talk a little bit. Swig a little bit of sweet Target distilled water. Let's go back in and see what we got. Yeah, it really does have a lessened impact, and it knows it's had this rich, that old school, much more aged kind of a barley wine quad stout kind of blendish kind of thing going on here. Where it does lean, which is what I said on the nose, more porty than I thought it would be. Even with the carbonation being a little bit bigger on the pour over here, it comes off a little bit thinner. And there's this tart. It's not sour. It's not even tart, but there's this hint of tartness. This hint of tart fruitiness that just makes me think like port wine. When you put in the other notes that you're getting, those rich kind of fruitiness and the barrels and stuff like that, it just reminds me very much more of port than a barrel-aged old beer. Very tasty, though. Yeah, surprisingly a little bit thinner than over here, just a skosh. You do get a bit of more roastiness than you do over here at your Russian Imperial Stout at play. But then all those notes that you got in the nose that were really, really big, and I thought we were going to kind of just steamroll over part 4 over here, it just kind of lost a little bit on its fastball. Was it better a year or two ago? Maybe. But just from a strictly nose standpoint, I just assumed part 3 over here was going to be the winner chicken dinner of the whole thing. And it's a lot closer with Knee Jerk. I'm going with 4 as my favorite of the two. Yeah. Tasty stuff. Tasty stuff regardless, but just a little bit of a letdown how awesome the nose was over here on 3. Take a swig of water, we'll go back to 4. We'll wrap this up to just do the cuvee, and we'll see what's what. Okay. Yeah, it's just, there's this, what lacks, what did I say earlier? Lacks a zip on its fastball, and it's not as big as I thought it would be. Going back and forth. Part 4 is definitely the more impactful, in a good way. I'm not just saying just impact alone is what makes a good beer, what makes a good barley, what makes a good big beer blend, what makes a good barrel-aged beer, but you want impact. You know, you're paying for these ABVs. You're talking about 12 to 13% on these. So you want them to be, you know, you don't want a gentle ride. You want to be, you know, tossed around a little bit. And over here is a bit more of a kind of gentle experience. Nice flavors. That very, very warming port kind of sensation. Port flavoring, port experience, like light, not light, but softer is the word I'm looking for, is great. But when you're talking about high ABV beers, I want a little bit of hair on fire, and part 4 is really doing it for me. So it's really cool. You know, over here again, I think the styles of the beers have become a little bit lost. You know, it is very much an amalgamation of a bunch of different styles that end up being its own kind of thing that I'm just associating with port. Well, over here, whatever this Nimpomsicle is, regardless of that in a quad, it's very much barley wine vibes, and it kind of wins for me. Let's put it that way. But really fun side by side. Again, heavy port vibes, richer roastiness. Probably the spirit barrel being a little bit less, hence those port vibes. It has a spirit kind of characteristic, but less barrel to it. Over here, a little bit more confectionery, coconut, vanilla. The barley wine takes hold, and there is a spirit thing going on here. You do get a bourbon. You do get the spiciness from the tribute to the rye. So it probably more levels to this, more nuance to this than this, but very, very fun. So let me take one more sip of this straight, because I wanted to even it out. The cuvee, there it is. Well, water, son. I drank a ton of water, actually. Where's my water bottle? I have this gigantic water bottle. I left them here accidentally. Okay. The nose knows. Okay. I'll tell you what, the nose actually is quite fun. I wouldn't say it's as electric as 3, but it's somewhere in between, which is like no shit Sherlock stuff, but the best of both worlds here. You're getting a barley wine kind of nose with that more richer kind of sugar daddy kind of vibe, so at least on the nose, it might be my favorite of the two. This ekes it out, but it's, let's put it this way, it's not meeting in the middle, it's closer to here, but you get a little bit of this. Yeah, let's dive in. Cheers, all. Okay. So, it's tasty. It's better than this. Oh, no. Reverse that. It's better than this. Is it better than this? It brings something very, very fun to the table. It brings that subtle port, that subtle roastiness. I think 2/3 this, 1/3 this is magic. Absolute magic. So that would be what I would say. If you have these at home, drink them like this. I would say this would be a really fun thing to do. I cap these. These carbs, even though it doesn't have a ton of carbs, should be fine till tomorrow. So I should be able to do kind of like a recap or maybe a super tubie. Or at least maybe pour a little bit of my winner off and do that side by side of the winner with the other one. And but this is really fun. And thank you very much, Benjamin, for giving them to me. And thank you very much for Rushing Duck for making these beers. And yeah, Christmas, y'all. I'm not a religious person, but I am all in on Christmas. The Christmas vibes, Christmas stuff, doing all the Christmas things. And for me, that's, obviously family and just having fun and enjoying yourself. And this is quite the fun side by side. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Now we want to talk about Rushing Duck. I'm not going to sit here and say about value and availability. These are kind of older beers. You're probably not going to be able to get them unless you have an awesome friend like Ben, who's like, I'm going to give you 9 billion of things. But what is your experience with them as a whole? Have you had these beers? That's a great, have you had them? And what do you think? Have you had their barrel-aged products before? I think they're quite underrated when it comes to barrel-aged beers, but what is your experience? And have you had anything from the brewery? Have you had, and this is actually one that I really want to know, have you been to a bunch of Orange County-esque breweries and not been to Rushing Duck? Have you been to Drownlands? Have you been to Equilibrium? Have you been up that way? Have you been to those places and not gone to Rushing Duck? Because if you have, I want to hear from you, because I'm going to yell at you. Because they are fantastic. And you should go. So there you go. Blend in the books. Christmas Eve in the books. I'm going to go watch a little bit of crappy football, watch some records. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. Hopefully you're enjoying a little bit of food and drink with friends and family. Hope to see you next time. Cheers, y'all.